As Congress gets back to work this week, a few blocks away, the conservative think tank the Heritage Foundation has been working on Project 2025. That's a plan to reshape government, which they say has been weaponized against American citizens and conservative values, to give power to a Republican president who they hope will be Trump, to assemble an army of conservatives to come to Washington, and to deconstruct the administrative state. Paul Dans is director of Project 2025. He was chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management in the Trump administration.
And remind yourself just how bad it was by repeating out loud the simple fact, Donald Trump is a fascist.
We don't have to envision an authoritarian fantasy. We're living in an authoritarian reality right now under Biden. I mean, he was the one who made people take the jab.
Attest to the, to use Ed's word from earlier today, the ecumenical nature across the conservative movement of this whole effort.
Begin tonight with a terrifying concept.
A frightening article.
They're calling it Project 2025.
Incredibly important reporting people need to pay attention to.
This plan that they want to put in place if the Republican Party wins the presidency upon the inauguration.
According to the New York Times, those plans include bringing independent agencies under direct presidential control.
It's kind of being pitched under the guise of dismantling the administrative state.
They say they would plan to do this with any Republican president.
It's about deregulation. It's about deconstructing the administrative state.
There's a network of conservative groups who are backing this effort, like the Heritage Foundation.
Take this very seriously. Don't think this is a joke.
It is incredibly alarming.
Frightening development.
You don't have to be a civics dork to know that you don't want that.
We've never seen anything like this in American history.
That's Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Mark Milley, seen here at DEF CON Eyebrow. In a new book, Milley reveals that following the election night, he thought the ex-president was stoking unrest, possibly in hopes of an excuse to invoke the Insurrection Act and call out the military, saying, "This is a Reichstag moment." No surprise, the last president was very popular with the alt-Reich.
I want to talk about the Heritage Foundation holding a job fair at the Iowa State Fair because they're looking for a certain type.
Systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state.
The Reichstag fire was in 1930s Germany when an attack on the country's legislative branch was used as a pretext to solidify fascist control. What the Maga crowd did this year was totally different because it was in English.
Big story, very important story, about how the leading Republican presidential candidate, Donald Trump, and Republicans more broadly, have this plan that they want to put in place if the Republican Party wins the presidency in 2024. They're calling it Project 2025 because this is a plan that's supposed to go into effect upon the inauguration of Donald Trump in 2025. Either Trump or some other Republican president gets inaugurated in January of 2025, and Project 2025 thereby goes into effect. This plan is being coordinated by a right-wing think tank called the Heritage Foundation, and it is a plan to radically change the form of governance that we have in the United States.
Milley says that he was alerted that the former president and his allies were trying to overturn the government by a call from an old friend. The orange eggplant is a not-Z clown. We are in deep doo-doo.
This has never happened in our movement. We've never had this coming together of the entire movement to prepare for one event, day one, January 20th. And what brings all these organizations together? Our common theme is to take down the administrative state, the bureaucracy, and you're going to. It's not as easy done as it is said. The bottom line is that we need to have an army of conservatives ready to march in day one. And they don't even know who they are yet. They're hoping that we're going to get the word of Project 2025. They're going to come from all 50 states and come here to Washington. And they're going to be equipped because of how we're training them and giving them the battle plans.
The plan is to replace the entire federal government with that type.
So as to concentrate all the power of the government in the hands of a single leader. Quote, our current executive branch was conceived of by liberals. What's necessary is a complete system overhaul. Quote, what we're trying to do is identify the pockets of independence inside the U.S. government and seize them.
Now, the general was confident the coup attempt would fail, telling aides, they may try, but they're not going to succeed. You can't do this without the military. You can't do this without the CIA and the FBI. We're the guys with the guns. That is not as reassuring as you think.
What I'm talking about is Project 2025. And they're explicit about what they want to do.
Seize them, so there won't be any more pockets of independent power outside the power that is held by the president. Now, as I said, they want this to be Donald Trump. They want him to be the guy in whose hands all this power is concentrated. But they say they would plan to do this with any Republican president. The plan is to change the structure of the U.S. government so the next president, the next Republican president, will take direct control of all state power. He would, for example, take over all federal law enforcement and run that directly for his own benefit through the DOJ. There would be no more independence of federal law enforcement.
It's Project 2025. It's a call for you to come work here, Washington, D.C.
Conservatives face a tough challenge in Washington, the swamp. The left has built a system that blocks and sabotages our efforts to run our government and deliver a conservative agenda.
All of the guardrails, all of the regular governmental employees, all of the career types that worked for multiple presidents and multiple governments, the people that keep democracy rolling, that's who they want to replace.
People would come into the government on behalf of a president and not be bought into the agenda that he was elected to do. They were either uncommitted or incompetent.
Things aren't going to change unless you commit to serving our country.
We want to make sure that the plans that are in place have been vetted so that the person knows not only what argument and excuses come in their way, but what the answer is, and have the trust of a movement-wide effort led by the Heritage Foundation to make sure that they know that it's credible and it's conservative.
Milley didn't relax after the January 6th insurrection was thwarted. In the run-up to Biden's inauguration, telling his troops, here's the deal, guys. These guys are Nazis. They're Boogaloo boys. They're Proud Boys.
The next president would take control of private business in this country for his own benefit through the powers of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. The next president would revive an old and, I should say, illegal practice called impoundment, which would basically take away the fundamental powers of Congress and put that power, too, in Trump's hands.
These are the same people we fought in World War II. Oh, come on, General. They're insurrectionists, sure. But what makes you think these guys are Nazis? That's an actual photo. That's a real picture. Those are actual.
Because Ken Cuccinelli doesn't want to have the same problems that he had on January 6th.
This time, we have a secret weapon. This time, we have Project 2025. By learning from the experience of former conservative appointees, we can overcome common obstacles and get things done.
The reason I got involved is because I wanted to be part of a movement-led effort, and Heritage Foundation has used their influence to be able to convene the movement.
We can be ready to hit the ground running on day one of the next administration. In the wise words of Morton Blackwell, you owe it to your philosophy to study how to win.
Clearly, the former president didn't like the tea that Milley spilly, because earlier today, the ex-pres released a statement declaring, I'm not into coups.
Again, identify the pockets of independence and seize them. So instead of checks and balances and limited government, we'd have more of a strongman system of government. We'd have a single leader with all the power of the state personally arrogated to him. No other part of the government, no other thing in the country at all would be allowed to constrain him. That sounds nice. It at least sounds simple.
Adding, if I was going to do a coup, one of the last people I would want to do with is General Mark Milley.
Ken Cuccinelli has a plan to make sure that never happens again.
Project 2025 will ensure a conservative agenda is ready to roll on day number 1.
Make sure that we, as conservatives, are prepared to hit the ground running January 20th, 2025.
Okay, you've clearly put some thought into this thing you're not into. Honey, come on, I'm not into three-ways. But if I was, I wouldn't do it with our neighbor Alice. Your sister was way hotter.
Fundamentally opposite to the whole idea of why we exist as a country in the first place. That this is where the American political right, where the Republican Party has been heading in the Trump era.
You know what would be funny if we just... Okay.
This task in 2024 is too big for any one think tank. This has to be a movement. And what we've done is use our convening power here at Heritage to bring the entire movement together. So 2025 is not a heritage thing, it's a conservative movement thing.
I'm not talking about the insurgency. I'm not talking about the coup. I'm talking about career government employees stopping it.
Systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state. A question to anybody else listening to this broadcast. Are you ready to eat bugs, give up air conditioning?
Who's suggesting that you eat bugs? I mean, really, Paul.
School teachers are. School teachers are, actually.
You're talking about we're in peril right now, as far as the survival of the planet. And you're talking about eating bugs.
The FBI is still tracking down all the brown shirts who left the brown stains on the Capitol on January 6th.
In general, by and large, the American people don't want to live under a single leader who has concentrated all power in his own hands, and nothing constrains him and nothing else matters other than his own whims and preferences and grudges.
I'll tell you all about it in tonight's Seditionist Roundup.
I can't stomach these idiots.
Cows have 4 stomachs. First up, this guy photographed hanging from the Senate balcony. He's like Spider-Man if he got bitten by a radioactive idiot.
Now, they had General Flynn's own brother stopping the military from showing up.
You don't want to live in a country under a leader like that who's a good guy, let alone a leader like that who's a bad guy. I mean, you don't have to be a civics dork to know that you don't want that. and I think by and large, the American people really don't.
Turns out he's Iowa resident Josiah Colt, seen here preparing to audition for the Musketeers. Colt appeared in court yesterday where prosecutors explained how he and his buddies came to D.C. strapped to the teeth.
They had sent Kash Patel to the Pentagon to slow down that roll.
It covers the entire waterfront of the department, which is 250,000 employees, over a $50 billion budget. There's a lot of ground covered under the banner of the Department of Homeland Security. Some of what we look to do here is lead the way and have urge a president to lead the way in changing the law, not just issuing executive orders, but permanent changes to how American government works.
With a Glock 43 pistol, 2 magazines of ammunition, a handheld taser stun gun, knives, gas mask, body armor, an expandable baton, walkie-talkies, and bear mace.
Making a massive database, conjoining all of our personnel recommendations into essentially a conservative LinkedIn.
They brought bear mace to a Stop the Steal rally? What do they think was being stolen? A picnic basket?
Hey, boo-boo.
Okay.
Hey, yo, let's storm the Capitol.
But ultimately, there were still people who got those men on the trucks. Those people are gone.
Say, hey, here's what you should take a look at when you're going to build out how to run EPA or the Department of Justice or DOD.
There are people who maintained the phone records. Now, the ones on January 6th are completely missing. But quite a few of them are not. From other people's phones. Those people are gone.
There's a battle plan, plans, executive orders. How do you write those? What rules are important? What should you focus on? What can you anticipate that Congress may want to reverse?
It's like a lot of these dinguses, Colt seemed confused about where he was on January 6th. Even though he was spelunking down the side of the Senate, he apparently believed he was in the House.
This is not the Heritage Foundation trying to make America more American. This is the Heritage Foundation publicly setting up a plan to take over the government permanently.
Covers the entire waterfront of the department, which is 250,000 employees, over $50 billion budget.
The judge asked him, you sat in the presiding officer's chair, which you mistakenly thought was Speaker Nancy Pelosi's chair. Is that an accurate summary? Colt said, yes. So he had no idea where he was. For his next heist, he's going to break into the vault at Joseph A. Bank.
Guardrails of career employees are the only reason Trump's not a dictator today.
We go through them agency by agency as well, including some of the things we think we should be rid of, like the TSA. It isn't that there shouldn't be security, but government doesn't need to run that.
Here's a better joke for Mr. Colt. Knock, knock. Who's there? It's the FBI. You're going to jail.
All those people are gone. They want to replace 250,000 employees that work for the federal government with their own people.
Just by way of example. And that's not new to the conservative movement, but I think it is new to a lot of America.
For some, it was in the gene pool, like 5 members of one Texas family who were arrested for the Capitol attack. Evidently, January 6th was Take Your Kid to Hang Mike Pence Day.
This really would tee up an incoming administration to achieve more than we've ever seen under a conservative president before.
The family was caught on Capitol surveillance cameras.
And in case you don't know who their own people are,
there's the dad, Tom Munn, his wife, Dawn, and 3 of his adult children, Josh, Christy, and Kaylee.
Guess where Tucker Carlson came from? The Heritage Foundation. That's who they want to replace this with. A bunch of goddamn Tucker Carlsons. So that we'll all be goddamned.
I can attest to use Ed's word from earlier today, the ecumenical nature across the conservative movement of this whole effort.
Tough to get caught like that, but at least they have this year's Christmas card, Treason's Greetings. Earlier.
And that only makes it stronger. It really does. It's a very powerful way to see a bunch of individualists and organizations that value individual liberty set aside their own interests to work just purely on behalf of good conservative policy has produced a really outstanding product.
It turns out that progressives advocating for government regulations on toxins in water and our children's toys turns us into China.
Rick and I were up in Trump Tower in the winter of 2016 I was working on the personnel project. Rick was running the whole operation. It's just so important. Getting the right people, and that's what that we've been focused on. Is the personnel database is going to be robust. It's going to provide strong recommendations.
And to hear Tucker tell it, after he's made VP, it'll just be days before he's president, because he seems to be angling for an assassination.
It fabricated a lot about what happened on January 6th in order to impeach him again. It didn't work. He came back. Then they indicted him. It didn't work. He became more popular. Then they indicted him 3 more times. And every single time his popularity rose. So if you begin with criticism, then you go to protest, then you go to impeachment, now you go to indictment, and none of them work, what's next? I mean, graph it out, man. We're speeding toward assassination, obviously. And no one will say that, but I don't know how you can't reach that conclusion.
Which every liberal, of course, is against, because that would keep the son of a bitch out of prison. We damn sure don't want to give the right wing a martyr. We want to give the right wing some asshole in jail. I'm Zachariah, Lone Star Liberal. Y'all take it easy.
You got 50 different conservative organizations have contributed to this. That's what makes this a strong product. No presidential campaign or president is going to be able to ignore it.